18-year-old Lloyd Duane Bogle and 16-year-old Patricia Kalitzke went by the names Duane and Patty. The couple had been dating for a few months and had started talking about marriage. They were last seen at Pete's Drive-In on January 2, 1956 in Great Falls, Montana. When Patty didn't arrive home for her 10 p.m. curfew, her parents thought that she and Duane may have eloped. Sadly, their bodies would be found over the course of 2 days, but it would take another 65 years to solve the case. On January 3, 1956, 3 boys hiking along Sun River in an area known as Lover's Lane in Great Falls discovered a deceased man face down on the ground next to his car. The man was identified as Duane Bogle, and he was found shot with his hands bound behind his back with his own belt. The car was still running, and the headlights and radio were on. Robbery was apparently not a motive because there was cash, a knife, and an expensive camera found untouched in the car. During the excitement, it was realized that Patty was missing, and her family and investigators feared that she might have been kidnapped. The next day, a road worker found Patty's body 7 miles from where Duane's body had been found. It was located about 20 feet down an embankment, and she too had been shot. Patty was born in Great Falls and was a junior at Great Falls High School when she was killed. Duane attended Waco High School and was later assigned to the 29th Fighter Interceptor Squadron at Malmstrom Air Force Base, where he would meet Patty and the two would begin dating. At the time of the murders, it was reported that there was no indication that Patty had been sexually assaulted and that she had been found fully clothed. However, autopsy photos and reports indicated she had multiple blunt force trauma injuries, and the state's medical examiner said these were consistent with a struggle or sexual assault. Sergeant John Cadner said that it is possible that at the time of the murders, investigators might not have recognized the sexual assault, or maybe they just didn't want it publicly disclosed, as it was considered too taboo for the time period. One of the many people that were suspects at the time was Whitey Bulger, a prominent mob boss who was in the Great Falls area around the time of the murders, but DNA would eventually rule him out. In 1989, investigators removed bullets from a cottonwood tree near the spot where Duane's body was found, and they hoped it would be matched to a firearm. In 2001, detectives sent DNA swabs gathered from Patty's body to the Montana State Crime Lab for analysis. The lab found the DNA did not belong to Duane and entered it into the CODIS database but received no matches. In 2012, Sergeant John Cadner began working with the Bogle technology to generate a new DNA sample from the original sample, and in 2019 they were successful. They were able to upload the sample to voluntary genealogical databases where they discovered a possible familial connection. Tracing the family's tree led investigators to suspect Kenneth Gold, a man born and raised in Great Falls where the couple was killed. Although Gold died in 2007 and his body was cremated, his children consented to submit DNA samples, resulting in a match. Gold's family home in 1956 was located a little over a mile from where Patty lived, and he was known to ride horses throughout the area. According to the Great Falls Tribune, Gold was 24 when he married 16-year-old Lulu Bell Brown in 1952. Gold and his family would move from Montana to Missouri in 1967. Gold did not have a known criminal history and was never interviewed during the murder investigation, and no connection could be uncovered between him and the victims. Just over a month after the killings, Gold sold the family property and moved to Tracy, located southeast of Great Falls, and in July, he and his family were living in Geraldine. They lived in Hamilton from 1958 until 1967, when they moved to Alton, Missouri. As of today, Kenneth Gold has not been connected to any other crimes or cases. On September 20th, 1982, Kelly Ann Prosser was an 8-year-old student at Indianola Elementary School in Columbus, Ohio. After school, Kelly would start her 15-block walk along East 16th Street to her family's home. Several witnesses would report they saw her coming off East 16th Street and onto North High Street. Witnesses also reported seeing her walking on North High Street and eventually crossing onto Lane Avenue where she was last seen. When she didn't arrive home, her mother attempted to track her down by calling the school and Kelly's friend's parents' house, but no one had seen her. By 6 p.m., she called 911 and reported her daughter missing. A man driving on A.W. Wilson Road in Plain City, Ohio, would find a blue rain jacket in the middle of the road. He would stop, grab the jacket, and toss it in his vehicle. He and his family didn't think much of it until his daughter recalled hearing the news of a little girl who went missing nearby and was also wearing a blue rain jacket. They would notify the police and they would begin searching the rural area, but the search was called off at 2 a.m. after it became too dark outside. The family's suspicions were correct and the rain jacket turned out to be Kelly's. The next day, a local patrolman found Kelly's body in a cornfield in Plain City. Her death was immediately ruled a homicide, and the Columbus police would begin a search for a killer that would take over 40 years. There were multiple suspects at the time who were never officially ruled out until decades later when DNA testing became accessible. Around 2014 or 2015, the DNA collected from the crime scene was entered into the CODIS database, but there were no hits. In 2020, the detectives on her cold case began a podcast called The Fifth Floor. It brought attention back to Kelly's case in the hopes that anyone who had any new information would come forward. That same year, detectives began working with a genealogy company called Advanced DNA, hoping to identify a suspect using the DNA from the crime scene. They were able to establish a family tree and an initial family match with a third cousin. Through the process, they would determine that Kelly's killer was Harold Warren Jarrell. Police said he had come to Columbus from West Virginia and worked at a local radio station as well as some odd jobs. In 1977, 5 years before Kelly was murdered, Jarrell was charged and convicted of a sex crime and abduction of another 8-year-old girl in Columbus, Ohio. However, he was released from prison in January 1982 after only serving 5 years. 8 months later, he would abduct and kill Kelly. The Prosser family had no known connection to Jarrell, and detectives believe it was a true stranger abduction and murder. Jarrell died in 1996 at the age of 67 in Las Vegas. He would have been 53 at the time of her murder. An anonymous Crime Stoppers tip in 2014 did mention Jarrell, but it used a variation and spelling of his name that did not lead detectives to him, and Jarrell was never mentioned in Kelly's case file. Kelly's mother and sister were glad that the detectives never gave up, but saddened that her killer was not brought to justice and that it took 38 years to be solved.